Welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here with my friend, partner, and James Beard award-winning author of the cookbook, How to Cultivate a Major Cardiac Event Before the Age of 60, a compendium of anecdotes and recipes of how to cook and eat anything that ever had fur, feathers, or a face. South Dakota's favorite son, Wes Brown.
That's so funny. Yeah. For all my listeners that really care, I had to have a heart score scan, and it turned out I was in the upper 95th percentile of having a major heart event for somebody my age. So then I went and had a stress test, and luckily that came out normal. But make sure you run out and buy my cookbook so you can be in the 95 percentile as well, because I don't want to be there by myself. So I felt like I'm winning. Anyway, yeah. So that was funny. Way to go. No, I do not have a cookbook. But that's hilarious.
Now you need to make a cookbook.
Well, I probably could.
The best part of the story is that he goes and he gets the stress test and then proceeds to go to a restaurant and eats biscuits and gravy.
That was after my test. I figure I owed it to myself and that's my thing. Every time I go to a doctor's appointment, I always reward myself with something tasty before I go back to work. But yeah, I went and had biscuits and gravy with a side of hash. So anyway, pushing it to the limit.
If you die on me, I'm going to be very upset.
I'll try not to.
It's your only vice, I know. Food is your vice.
No drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes, no cigars.
I was thinking today,
I do like food.
Are they going to put you on a special diet?
They didn't say so, but my doctor said, "You're a smart guy. You'll figure it out."
Yeah, and then he goes and has biscuits and gravy.
That's right. Anyway,
I'm thinking maybe we should try to lose some weight together, because I have some pandemic pounds too that I need to get rid of. Let's do it. Maybe we'll start tracking our weight on Instagram. But we need to make it interesting, because I know you won't do it. I mean, you'll do it for a little bit, and so we got to be accountable. But I'm almost thinking that there needs to be money involved.
Oh, cool. Sounds good to me.
I know you'll do it if there's money involved.
That's right. I need some retirement money, because I'm going to live a long life. All right, let's talk art.
Yes. Before our guest just logs off and leaves us here. She's like, what the hell did I get myself into?
Yeah.
Our guest this week is an electrifying artist. She currently has an exhibit at the Bridge Project entitled Supersonic Nonplace. That runs through the 26th of June, and she's one of the artists and the creative director of Babe Walls, a festival celebrating women and non-binary folks in art. You can check out our website at romelle.com. It's R0, the number 0, MELLE.com. And then you can find her on Instagram at Romelle. So check out her work. It's an honor to welcome to the program, Romelle. How are you?
I'm great. How are you all?
Good.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, taking time out of your evening. We really appreciate it. I want to start out like we've been doing as of recent. I want you to explain and tell our listeners what kind of work you do and what mediums you work in.
So I always describe myself as an abstract maximalist painter. So what that basically means is I'm using a lot of layers. I'm using a lot of different colors in a way that is very centered around almost meditation and layering things until it feels right. And sometimes that's like 10 layers, sometimes it's 5, but it's always a process of work that I'm sitting with. And so the type of work I do is primarily works for the studio or the gallery. And I ultimately am making like really bright, very high voltage, a lot of color. The work that I'm doing is what I would, I guess, ultimately describe as abstract contemporary art.
I like your description of maximalist, that part of it. Is that because the ultra vivid, ultra bright colors that you incorporate?
I think so. And I think that my work has a certain intensity to it as well. It's very, I wouldn't necessarily describe what I do as like a pretty or like gentle or even feminine way of making something. And I think like maximal to me feels very in your face. More is more, as they say. I've just sort of taken that word and made it mean what I want it to mean in certain ways too, but that's kind of where the description comes from.
Yeah, I like that twist. I really do. I think it's cool. And your stuff is really vivid and bold, and I like that. It's really interesting to look at. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
You live here in Denver, but you're not originally from here. Is that correct? You're originally from Detroit?
Yes. I grew up in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. So I've been in Denver for, I think, about 3 years now. And I actually went to school in Colorado up in Boulder. So I've been around Colorado for I always say off and on 10 years. Yeah, but I'm originally from the Detroit area.
What was that like growing up in Detroit?
Well, I grew up in the suburbs, so it's not necessarily what you hear about in the city sense, but I think it sort of ties into the current show I have up right now, which talks about non-places, which are, if you're familiar with the term, it sort of references places we know of as parking lots or highways where nothing is really a particular place until something meaningful happens there. And so I think about my upbringing in Detroit, which was really great, but there's not the same sort of scenery that there is in Colorado, where there's mountains and it's scenic. And in Metro Detroit, it's just a lot of parking lots and public pools. It's just a really different surrounding. So that's kind of what, in some ways, inspired the current show that I have up right now at Bridge.
I got a quick question, and this is just a side note. So, because I've never been to Michigan or Detroit area. So in the outside areas, is it heavily wooded or is it farmland?
It's kind of a mix of a lot. I think as you start getting into more northern areas, there's definitely a lot of wooded areas and farms and things like that. But I think what makes Michigan so interesting and so beautiful is that there's a lot of different types of land and different sort of agriculture within the entire state. Because up north, it's the Upper Peninsula, you have a coast and you have a different layout versus being in the city of Detroit. That's very much a setting of its own. So it's kind of, I really love Michigan because you can have totally different experiences within one state.
So when you say, and I agree, I used to live in Colorado. Colorado is very scenic. Pretty much anywhere you go in Colorado, it's a beautiful place to be. Mm-hmm. And so I was just kind of trying to understand what Michigan was like, because like I said, I've never been to Michigan. So I'll definitely have to check it out, though.
It just depends on where you go and depends on what you're looking for.
Right.
Do you miss it?
Yeah, all the time. My family still lives in Detroit. And yeah, it's one of my favorite cities. I think it is a special place for me, too, because it's where I started really doing art in a professional sense. I had an art residency with Playground Detroit and Pony Ride, which is an organization based in the city. So that was in 2016, I believe. And so that was the first time I was really immersed in what I know as the art world. Because of that, it has a pretty special, emotional attachment that goes along with those memories.
And it has a pretty decent art scene, doesn't it, Detroit?
It does. And I follow along with a lot of friends of mine in different galleries that are obviously still there. And I'm always just really impressed and motivated by the work that comes out of there to this day.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about this, so what draws you to Denver over Detroit since you like it so much there? Is there something that really grabs you here as far as the art community here as compared to there? Can you talk about the differences between the two?
Sure. So I ended up in Denver 3 years ago. And at the time, I didn't really know what I wanted to be doing in the sense of making art or what my role would be. I just knew that I wanted to be making it. And I think I had stepped away from Detroit at the time because I didn't feel I actually don't really know. I don't really know why I stepped away from Detroit, but I feel it's always a place that I call home, and assumed that my move to Denver would be very temporary. So I wasn't even thinking about it in the sense of making a very conscious move to Denver. And I think it's a similar story that I've talked to a lot of other artists about, is in the sense of moving to Denver. A lot of people move here without the intention of staying for a long time, but they end up staying because of the people they meet. And I think that's definitely true for me. And I think that's why I've stayed so long. And one of the one of the really cool things I've been able to be a part of recently is Babe Walls, which, as you said, is the mural festival that we run, which happens every year now. But it's a community of women and non-binary artists. And to be able to really hold space for community in that way has been really powerful and has made feeling like being in Denver isn't as small as it could be. I think that the more you dig in, the more you realize there's so many talented, amazing artists either already here or moving here. It's just like, it's pretty endless. And so to answer your question, I've still stayed here because I've found purpose in it.
Gotcha.
I found purpose in being here. So.
And you talked about these residencies that you did. You did one here and you did two in Detroit. Is that what you said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that, because and what that brings to your practice and what it can add to an artist that maybe has never done a residency.
So I think the cool thing about residencies is that the purpose of them is always very different. So with the first residency I did and spoke on, the main sort of purpose of that was more so to be able to like integrate within the art community and be able to network and get to know people already in that world. And with the second art residency I did in Detroit was with, it's called The Forge. And with that one, it was a little bit more self-started, which had its own sort of intention behind it too. And then I guess as far as like my recommendation would go for artists looking to get into residencies would be to determine like what you're hoping to get out of it. Because I think if you're hoping to network with community, that residency will look a certain way versus if you're trying to just develop work and have it be more intrinsically focused, that residency is going to also look different, and neither is wrong or bad or better or worse. It's just a matter of like where you're at in your own career and your own practice and like figuring out how to work alongside people that want to support you doing that.
Yeah, I can see approaching it with purpose would make a big difference. So, and I could see myself like, just like, oh, there's a residency, let me apply. But I think if you think more strategically about it, like you said, it can either boost your career or boost maybe the look or the movement of where you're going as an artist or build community. So I think that's a great way to say it. Yeah.
Do you plan on applying for other residencies here in the future?
You know, at this point, I've been focused on doing more shows and just building bodies of work. And I'm really lucky to have a studio in Rhino that I love. For a long time, being able to do residencies was an outlet so that I could have a studio. And I'm fortunate to be in the position I'm in right now that I've had this space, I think, for almost 2 years. And so I'm not going to say no, but I think that where I'm at right now is much more focused on like community and Babe Walls and figuring out how to like work alongside other artists that I already have a relationship with, as opposed to like trying to start over somewhere new.
Gotcha. Have you always been pretty like self-directed, like even as a child?
No, you'll have to ask my parents about that. I think so. I grew up an athlete, so I think that plays a big role in like the way I approach my work, but it's not something that happens like overnight. I think I was just like any other kid growing up, but once I started to play sports, it was more focused. And I think being able to develop your own work and your own work ethic around something, no matter what it is, whether it's like sports or school or your career, I think it's all using the same muscle.
So you grew up doing competitive swimming, right? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
What did that bring to your art practice? Did it bring discipline?
It did. Yeah. I think that's like kind of, as I was saying with the whole work ethic thing, like growing up swimming was the thing that didn't feel as formative as it was in the moment. But like, as I got older and graduated college and wasn't swimming in college anymore and didn't have that same framework, I realized that I was still like implementing certain structures for my own like schedule or practice that a lot of other people maybe weren't, or were just doing a different way. And I traced it back to having the structure of like, whether it was swim practice or kind of setting goals for myself, I think it was definitely something that has helped me, like, I guess, stay and keep that intensity of like working hard towards something. I think that's something I really enjoy. And I think I feel lucky to have found something that I can continue to challenge myself with. And art feels similar to being in the pool in a lot of ways.
Because you did competitive swimming, are you pretty competitive, not necessarily with other artists, but with yourself? Because I would assume that it's about getting better all the time, right?
I think so. That's a good way to put it. I think it's like, the way I look at it is that I have high expectations of myself, but at the same time, I think the real benefit of having been on so many teams growing up and really understanding how to work with other people. And even if you don't get along with somebody, it's like, for the sake of the team, you gotta figure out how to get along. So yeah, I think on my own, definitely I have expectations of what I want to do with my work, and I'm competitive with myself in that way. But I think also understanding that it doesn't mean anything unless you have the people around you, like, on your team too. So I really try to think about that as well.
Really about the community and the support system of all your friends. And
yeah, totally.
Okay. Did you grow up in a creative family?
I did. My younger brother is in a punk band in Detroit. I guess all my siblings are doing something really creative. I do have 2 siblings that are engineers, but they also have like creative hobbies. And my mom can pretty much build anything, like construction wise, which is pretty amazing. And no one's like in my immediate family anyway, no one's like a visual artist. My little sister is, but neither of my parents are. So definitely like I was a creatively encouraged kid. It was definitely something that I was supported in the whole time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's spectacular. When, I mean,
it really
even,
is.
right? Because like not everybody gets that. You know, if their parents weren't necessarily into the visual arts or creative people, they might not get that kind of support. But it sounds like your parents are pretty awesome and giving you that.
Yeah, well, and it's not to say they like totally understood it the whole time too. There's like definitely like a healthy skepticism of like, well, you know, if you're going to go to art school, maybe think about taking some business classes. And so I ended up double majoring in art and advertising, which helped immensely. So they were supportive, but in a way that was really like truly constructive. And I'm grateful for that for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
That's really smart.
Yeah. And that's just the parental thing that kicks in when you have children. I think it's that concern thing. Like, hey, I want you to pursue your dreams, but at the same time, I also want you to be pragmatic and give yourself either that tool set or think of the plan B, right? But yeah, that's really cool. So what was the catalyst that set you on this path to pursue art full time?
I think I've always wanted to do it, but as a kid, you don't understand how romantic that idea can be until you try to do it in the real world. And you're like, wait a minute, I was told this was like a thing you could do. And now I'm trying to get a job as an artist and nobody's hiring me. I think when I did the art residency after college, like the first one in Detroit, was sort of this taste test into that world. And I think I understood and was aware that it was not going to be easy, but that I had to give it a shot and give it a couple years in order to like really see if I was making any sort of crack at it. But I've always just felt very motivated by like the way I envision my life and what I'm doing with it. And I think a lot of other stubborn people probably relate to that too, where if someone tells you, no, that's not really possible, it makes you want to do it more. Or if someone tells you like, that there's no room or there's no way you can do it, I become even more interested in proving them wrong. And so I think it was a combination of a lot of things. It wasn't like one decision, but 2-year period of having to make that decision every day to keep pursuing it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how some people will say, they'll say like, you can't do this. You'll never make a living of it. And then how that will motivate some people, but discourage the others. Because I'm kind of a pragmatic person. If somebody, well, you're never going to make money doing this, I could see my younger self going, well, then I'm going to look for something else, instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong. But I think that's what makes people like you successful, is that you're willing to push against people that are criticize your dreams or whatever.
Mm. And realizing too, that when people come to you with that energy, it's never really, I try not to take that personally, because for them, it's probably something along the lines of like, they never had anyone supporting them in their own dreams. And like the only way they know how to respond when someone tells them about and like opens up about what they want their life to look like, they don't have a positive response out of like, just naturally, that's not what they know. And so I try to remind myself of that too, like that no one is me. And I would give the same advice for anyone who's trying to make art or has a specific vision to what they want to do with their career, whatever it is. Just because no one's going to have that vision in the same clear way that you do. And that's what makes it unique, is that it's yours. So like, how could you possibly expect someone to see it if it doesn't even exist yet?
Yeah. There's a lot of people doing abstract art, and I could see somebody saying, well, there's too many people in it. Maybe you should do figurative art or something, or landscapes, instead of, you're absolutely right. They're not going to do it like you do it. Obviously no two people are doing it the same way. And you're going to have people that resonate with your work that doesn't resonate with somebody else's. But, there's plenty of room for everybody, I think.
Exactly. I really think that too. I know that's true. And I think that's what makes it interesting, is because not everybody likes what I do, but there's plenty of other art that I don't make that people also enjoy. And I think that's what's really cool about art in general, is like, it's more about how you connect with it. And there's definitely something for everybody in that space.
That's a great perspective. And I think people forget that a lot. I think it's easy to get caught up when things aren't exactly flowing, or maybe you're not selling work. Eventually it happens, and you will resonate with a group of people that will really enjoy what you do. And first and foremost, you're making the work because you want to make it, and it's for yourself, correct?
I would say so, yes. I think in any art practice, a lot of the time it has to be this like intrinsic, you have to be connected to it. And I think that's why I make art. I see it as this sort of resolve. And I don't know what my life would look like without it, but I think it definitely is something that I do for me at the end of the day.
I read that you started out doing figurative work. What drew you to start doing abstract work?
So it's funny you asked that, because I was looking through my old school, like from college, I was looking through my old work that I was doing in screen printing. So I focused on photography and like printmaking, and I didn't take any painting classes, which is hilarious now. But at the time I didn't know. I just knew that I liked art and that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, my work was kind of all over the place. It was like I was doing foundations classes, which were figurative. I was doing photography. I was doing all these other things. But a lot of the scraps that I found of the work that I was making had these like, I was just messing around with like all these abstract patterns, and the things that I kind of like was making on the side without even realizing it was what became more of what my current practice is now. So I think in the beginning, it was definitely very subconscious of like what I was drawn to. But my junior year of college, I ended up taking a art history class on modern and contemporary art, which just like blew my mind. And we're studying Jackson Pollock, Elaine de Kooning, all of these greats that I had never heard of before, and seeing work that was so free. And so the work itself like gave me a certain permission to just not have to worry about something being representational or even figurative. It changed my whole world. And I think ever since then, I had some sort of like permission granted after that class. Was very much eye-opening into what art could look like versus what it was looking like at the time for me.
Yeah. And what's funny is when I took art history, I had the exact opposite feeling. I and, which probably is not uncommon, but I was drawn more to the classics and less towards modern contemporary. And definitely, again, I didn't understand Pollock or Rothko or Mondrian. It just was like, I look at it and I was like, oh, well, if I can do it, it ain't art. And I feel like I can do that, right? Which we know now is not a true statement. But it's funny that you had the opposite effect, where it was like that was freeing to you and it resonated with you. Of the classical, let's say, abstract expressionists, who inspired you the most?
So Gerhard Richter is a big one for me. I think seeing the way he uses a squeegee to kind of scrape the canvas, seeing those new materials was very interesting to me. And then I remember also really loved Bridget Riley, who did a lot of really fine, almost like they were very intricate patterns. And she's almost coined as the queen of op art, like optical illusion art. And I remember studying her color palettes as she moved, as she traveled. Her color palette kind of changed with her. And I've like noticed the same, like a similar aspect of my own work too. But those were two that really stuck out for me, were Richter and Bridget Riley.
Yeah, her work, Bridget's work, is really amazing. So, yeah.
You just mentioned how travel informed her work. You've traveled quite a bit too, it sounds like. How has that played into your practice and the work that you do?
Well, I see it as sort of like a sponge to take with me. And there's actually, I think it's either a painting or the title of a show by Joan Mitchell too, which says, I carry my landscapes around with me. And so I think about it in a similar light of the things I see. It can be super mundane, but like in some way or another, I'm always pulling from it. And by traveling, of course, you're surrounded, especially when I was in Thailand. I feel like that was a time where I was definitely pulling more color from those experiences. But I would say the most significant so far has been when I lived in Miami. I lived there for 6 months before I moved back to Denver. And I still see a lot of those like more tropical tones coming into my canvas. But yeah, I think it comes down to like a synthesis, and being a visual person, it's all going to respond in the way that I soak it up.
That's really interesting. How you mentioned how you can see something mundane, but or to other people, it might be mundane, but to yourself, you pull color out of that. Is that correct?
Sometimes, not all the time, but, or if I think even seeing like mundane situations and like imagining how they could be brighter, or like kind of using that as a blank canvas of its own, or sometimes like really mundane things. I mean, I'm looking at like a water bottle right now that's bright green. I'm like, there's nothing really that interesting about a water bottle, but this is a really cool green color. I wonder if I could use that, or like play with kind of the relationship of the green, red, and yellow that they worked with. Like, how can I adjust that into like what becomes my own work? Things like that, where it's like, there's nothing necessarily interesting about this, but it's what you do with it.
Gotcha. What's your regular scenario for your process? Like, do you just start painting a blank canvas? Do you sit there and kind of ponder it for a while? Are you looking at that water bottle and thinking, okay, this is where I'm going?
Well, I think being the structured person I am, I always like to think about things in a series or like a set. So a lot of times if I'm painting just to paint one canvas, that's kind of an exception. But if I have like a show, or I'd like to do a show, I try to think about it in the sense of taking a step back from it and thinking about what it all means and what I want it to mean, and kind of where I'm at in life at that moment, and how that looks or how that feels across canvas. So that always helps me kind of direct, whether that's like type of texture or color selection. Using that information to determine the structure of the show is always really helpful for me. So with that said, I end up usually painting between like 6 to 10 things at a time. Like for the show I have up with Bridge right now, I worked on all of those at the same time. And that's really comfortable for me, just in the sense of like being able to connect everything together. It feels really natural. And like the nature of my work is very layered. So while I'm watching paint dry on one thing, I can be working on another. So it doesn't feel maybe as sequential as other artists may work, but it's helpful for me to just have everything kind of in the oven at once, so to speak.
Yeah, and it probably brings a lot of continuity between the pieces. I could see that.
I think so. And you'll see a lot of colors that kind of like connect. And I think that's helpful because they're literally the same, the same palette as I'm using it.
Yeah.
I think it definitely helps.
Let's talk about the show down at Bridge. What can people expect to see when they walk into that space?
Well, I have been lucky enough to even be a part of it. I mean, there's 2 other great shows in the building. So the first thing you see before walking into mine is Sarah Bowling's. And then they have on the left of it, I guess depending on your entrance, but the other side is Inner Visions Collective, which is a group show that's up at the same time. So that's really cool to start. But when you walk into my solo show in the back room, you'll see kind of a varying size and scale and materials mix. There's some neon on panels. There's a neon piece just like directly on the wall. There's some larger scale, more pastel works, and then kind of just like different sizes that all feel like they can connect with each other. But it's, I would say, a high voltage, high energy abstract art show.
And you also have like this whole series of smaller pieces as well on the one wall. They're like 5x7. Is that the size of them?
Yes, they're 5x7. I think that sounds right. I should know this. They're like a postcard size.
Yeah. And they're all really stunning as well.
Thank you.
And I think that's cool that you worked in, that you have varying sizes and then different elements throughout the show with like the neon, which I thought was really like just interesting. The one piece, and I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but it actually looks like what you would do with the spray paint that you utilize in some of your paintings. Was that kind of the thought behind it?
Yeah. So I actually gave a neon fabricator a line drawing in spray paint.
Okay.
And had him trace it to scale. So your idea was exactly right. It looked like it was my hand because it was, but it was really cool to be able to explore into a different material. I think I'm always trying to push within each series I do, try to push something a little bit outside of my comfort zone. And that was definitely it. Yeah. I think the idea of the neon wasn't just only for the sake of trying something new. I think the entire show in itself is evoking this certain type of nostalgia. And when I think about that, and when I think about like non-places and being somewhere versus not being somewhere, neon signs feel so connected to that conversation. And I think being able to use these different reference points as things that help to inform the work and inform the viewer, that's always something I'm trying to like challenge and push forward.
Is this the first time that you've incorporated neon into your pieces, into your paintings? And what was the catalyst for that?
Well, I originally was, I was working on a neon project with another fabricator when I lived in Detroit, but I ended up moving too quickly to be able to like actualize it. So that was maybe like 5 years ago. And then I've always wanted to do it. It just like didn't feel like the right time. The timing of things didn't line up in the way that I wanted it to. And like I said, when I'm sort of planning these shows or thinking about what it means as a whole, kind of emotionally, I was drawn back to kind of this like vision of neon. And as I started to think more about it, the more I realized that emotional connection and the blanket statement of like what this show felt like also paired well with what became the works of neon.
The one piece that we were talking about, Supersonic Signs to Nowhere, that's a really beautiful piece.
Thank you.
If you go down the Bridge, you definitely have to check it out. It's on the back wall. And then you have another piece that's called Hand Styles version 1. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really killer piece as well. My favorite piece, and I'm not sure, I cannot exactly describe why I am drawn to it, but I just love this piece right here.
Oh yeah.
That was
Ground control. It's titled Ground Control.
Yeah, ground control. And I don't know, it's just striking, the
Thank
use
you.
of color and line. And then, yeah, talk a little bit about that piece if you can.
So I've been playing a lot with these lines as like a form of intentional movement. In my previous series, I had a show with Bell Projects here in Denver. And I had a few pieces that are, well, I have one behind me, but they have like this, what Barnett Newman would call zips, where they're stripes. And I don't know if you can see it, but
oh yeah,
kind of like these, in this series, it was all about this like black and white duality. And as I moved into this new series, I was using a lot less black and white, but that intentionality of lines still felt really relevant, still felt interesting. And so, within this piece, you see the lines going a different direction. And I added an element of more intentional checkerboard that was mainly in like the background of pieces in the previous series. So a lot of times, even if it was there, you couldn't see it. I think you could actually see the checkerboard coming through in like 3 or 4 of the pieces from the last series. But I'm just trying to take like things that still feel interesting and relevant to me and like not necessarily repurpose, but like make them make sense. And I think that's always something I'm striving for. And I think with this piece, I struggled with almost like the lack of layers, because I feel like I can almost see them all. Whereas a lot of my other work feels a lot more gritty, but at the same time, like I didn't want to add any more because it felt finished at that point. Yeah, I think the piece refers to like this nature of like being grounded in simplicity. And sometimes like we assume things need to be more complicated in order to mean anything, when really sometimes you get to the point faster, and that's okay too.
I like that. Do you live a pretty simple life?
What do you mean by that?
You don't strike me as somebody that lives really extravagantly. In other words, that you are grounded, and you seem like, I've only met you briefly one time previous, but you seem pretty in tune to your surroundings and who you are as a person. And I would even describe you as being somewhat, you strike me as being a spiritual person.
Thank you. I mean, those are all really nice things to say, so thank you for that. But I think I'm motivated by having that groundedness in my life. And I think the nature of being an artist can pull you from that in so many different ways. And so I think the practice of being an artist for so many people ends up being spiritual in its own way too, because your art is like reflection of who you are, no matter how you try to swing it. And that's tricky in its own way, because your professional work is so personal. Even when you try to distance yourself from it, it's still about you. I try to do the best I can to stay grounded, whether that's like my circle of people around me or being able to like focus on my work and ride my bike a lot. But at the same time, it's not perfect, but I do, I try to prioritize that.
Talk about the element of meditation and how that plays into your practice.
Well, for a long time, I saw swimming as a form of that for me. And that's not something I get to do all year round, unfortunately. But I think having that and recognizing that was what swimming was, even in high school, like having that mental space and learning about the like methods of moving meditation as something that can like help you. I just feel lucky that I kind of like was able to learn about that sooner than later. And then as I transitioned from being more of an athlete to an artist, I think inherently it's just like it's just become a part of the way I paint too. And I think I see it in the way I layer. I think I see it in kind of like if I'm having like a problem with a certain painting, which I usually do at least one time throughout the piece, being able to like sit with it and have that like moment of honesty. I think to me, like that's what meditation feels like, is being able to have those like honest moments with yourself and really check in with what you're thinking about, what you're feeling, whether you're painting something in front of you or whether you're sitting and actually meditating. I think there's a lot that corresponds between the two. And I feel those lines get pretty blurry when at the end of the day, it involves my thoughts nonetheless. I feel like that's a hard question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I think you answered it. Yeah. I mean, meditation takes a lot of different forms, right?
Right.
And, the swimming totally makes sense, running, biking, any of those things, but also, being in your element and your art practice, right? It's all meditative,
Right.
It takes you to a different place.
When you have to be present with your thoughts in that way, I think it's like, it doesn't even matter what you're doing, as long as you're eye to eye with your own thoughts. It doesn't matter what it's taking to get you there, whether you're just like sitting for it or painting or swimming. It requires that presence in a way. Yeah.
I totally get that. I think a lot of times we get hung up with the idea on meditation is that we got to sit with our legs crossed and our fingers touching and that's what meditation is, where really, like when you said you kind of thought swimming was that meditative for you, I can totally see that because, you're in the moment, all the senses are kind of drowned out and you're just doing your thing. And I can see where that can be a very meditative state. And painting has got to be the same way, I would think. Maybe not for everybody, but I could see where it could be a meditative practice. Mm-hmm. So in that line, right, if let's say we're talking about meditation and the process of painting, do you speak through your paintings or do your paintings speak to you? So in other words, like Michelangelo, when he was creating sculptures, a lot of times he would say, it's already in there, I'm just bringing it out. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think I see it as like a conversation that I'm always starting, where I'm the instigator of it, but as I sit there and I'm painting and sort of like face to face with the work, so much of the time I'll start to see stuff like pop out of it where I'm like, oh, I see a checkerboard pattern coming here, or it's, I think, asking for this like squeegee to be scraped across the canvas on the bottom left corner. I definitely see it as a conversation, and I think it definitely gets to a point too where it talks to me and it kind of asks me to respond back in that way. It's cyclical. And I think one of the hardest parts is knowing when it's done.
I love the idea that it's a conversation. Mm-hmm. I think that is just a beautiful statement, that you're having a conversation with this canvas or this wall or whatever you're painting on, and it's talking to you as well as you're talking to it. And I can see where finding that place where like I'm done, I can see that being a challenge for a lot of artists. And unless you have, a reference material that you're painting to, where like abstract expressionism or, it's a form of expression. And there must be a moment that you're either like, okay, it's good enough or it's done enough, or I feel like it's complete. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about maybe one piece and like having that epiphany of like, oh, I'm done at this moment?
Well, I think the one we were just looking at was a good example of that. The ground control piece with the pink with the checkerboard in the top right corner. I thought for sure I was going to add more layers to it as I was making it. But once I added certain elements, it kind of just like, you almost, when you're working with them in this like intimate way, it's almost like you can feel when there's nothing else that needs to be done, or like there's nothing else that, it's kind of like in a normal conversation with someone, when there's a natural pause, you feel that. And I think because I just spend so much time with these pieces, I kind of have this like weird attunedness to them. And this one kind of surprised me when I felt that way. Similarly, in painting a lot of other things, most of the time, I'll get to a point where I do a layer and I know that I'll have to come back to it. And that's typically how that goes. But as far as completing something, it usually feels like there is that natural like stopping point in it. But at the same time, it's really hard to do that. And I've definitely thought I was done with things that I've gone back and painted over again. So like, who really knows?
Right. So then have you ever, well, obviously you have, and there's probably, so my question is, let me just ask it. Have you got to the point where you're like, and then I do this, and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
All the time. Yeah.
Now I got to fix it.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's very real. But at the same time, I try to just like live with those mistakes. Even if a painting looked different before, it's like the process of how it's made that gives it the feeling it ultimately has at the end of it. Which is like a super meta way of thinking about it, but it makes me feel better about when I mess up a painting. I can just be like, well, it wasn't meant to be that. Right. Which I think, ultimately might be true too. I think you got to just run with it. And the more you dwell on things that could have been, you miss out on some of the good things or unexpected things.
And we were talking to an artist that was doing commission work, and they would communicate, like, here's the piece so far, which is probably a big mistake. But then they would come back and they'd be like, well, what happened to this element that was there? I thought that was really cool. She was saying, well, it's still there. It's just, it's something else, So.
That feels very relatable.
Yeah.
Did it take you a while to come to that realization, to go, okay, I got to just leave it alone?
I think so. I'm still learning and I'm still making plenty of mistakes, and I don't want to by any means claim that I know what I'm doing all the time, because I don't. But I think I put enough hours in the studio recently to know when not to work. Like if I'm feeling like on edge about something or I'm distracted, I'll know pretty much like the first layer I try to paint. I kind of know like, today's not a great day to be doing this, or like, I'll take a break and come back in an hour. At the same time, there's not a whole lot of control that you have with sometimes this like figurative, very expressive abstract work. The nature of it is just like, you got to just run with it, which can be scary, but also freeing when you just like lean into that sort of the openness of what could become the work.
We hear this a lot from various artists where, they reach that point where they're like, all right, this is not working the way I want it to work, or it doesn't feel right. You say that you step away. What kind of things do you do to kind of like reboot yourself in that kind of situation?
I'll usually just, as long as I'm not looking at the piece, I'm good. I'll usually just go like ride my bike or play guitar or something, like just completely take my mind away from being like in the presence of making something like out of paint. So I think as long as I'm doing something outside of that realm, it feels like I can come back to it with a fresh set of eyes.
I read an article where you talked about art and how it can heal. And I also read that you would struggle with some kind of chronic illness for a while. Talk about the healing aspect of art and what that does.
Well, I think this is an idea that as a whole, I mean, it's just so hard to pinpoint like what that means as a definitive answer, because I think it's something that I'll be kind of exploring as long as I'm making art. And I think the concept in there is more of like, by whether it's art or anything, I think doing the things that you feel called to do or that you want to do can be healing and have their own resolve. And I think at the time when I was discussing that article and kind of like putting myself out there in that way, it was important for me to kind of like reclaim my own health. And I felt like by committing to being an artist was a big part of like my own healing and stepping into like the person I knew I want to be and become. Yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen it in so many ways how art can heal and be a catalyst for growth in so many different ways. But it's interesting how like that journey of healing, so to speak, has become so many different things like throughout my short career thus far. I think like it started out by being something that referred to like a chronic illness, but then getting healthy and like kind of continuing to develop my work. Like the meaning of healing can also refer to like building community, like that can be healing. And I think there's so many meanings to what that entails. And I think having an open mind about what all these things mean can only help you to grow.
So being open.
Yeah.
Open to the experience and what it brings to it.
Yeah.
And what it does for you. Yeah, we've heard this a lot from, like I said, from different artists as far as what it has done for them, either psychologically or physically. And I love that you brought the whole community thing into play. And especially since we've gone through this, kind of a weird year, to say the least, where we weren't necessarily in tune with all the people we normally associate with and having that kind of community. How did the pandemic affect you as an artist and personally?
Well, I think in all, like the common conversation I was having with a lot of artists is that we kind of feel like generally pretty isolated on a day-to-day basis, because whether we're working from home or in the studio, like we're pretty insular. But I think as far as COVID went, like I just remember one of the first things we did was really dive into Babe walls, and we started our Kickstarter in March of 2020. So like mid-March, we were trying to raise $50,000+ for this festival. So talk about timing. Really interesting. But I think the benefit of having that project going on at the same time as the intensity of what COVID was a blessing in its own way, because we were so focused on making this festival happen and raising this money and like building this community that it didn't really matter. Like, of course it matters around COVID and everything that's going on, but we weren't like dwelling in the what ifs, and we were able to stay focused. And I think the benefit of like finding that purpose in Babe walls and stuff like that was really beneficial. But as far as like personally, I think the same kind of goes for probably a lot of artists you talk to, where work-life balance isn't a strong suit. It's not a strong point for me. I live this, and I think I threw myself into my work more than I ever had. And that's what kept me sane. And I think a lot of other artists felt the same way as I did.
Were you still showing this past year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, like, of course, adhering to like COVID precautions and whatnot, I shipped a show down to Sarasota, Florida over like last fall. So sort of let that happen from afar. And then in December of 2020, I had a show that was by appointment only. So like only one person at a time it's at Bell Projects, which is here in Denver, a smaller gallery. It's interesting because like the experience of that opening was really different from the opening I had with Bridge, where it was more people at once, and you don't really have the same conversations you have when it's by appointment only and it's kind of one at a time. So I think I really was finding ways to enjoy, even though it was different, it was still like, I was trying to at least make the most of like the uniqueness of that situation.
So as a whole, it was a pretty decent year as far as creativity, production, and still being able to show your work.
I think as far as like production and output, there's just certain times in life where you just have to push through it. And I definitely felt like it was one of those eras. As far as creativity, I think a lot of that was more of like something that was fed from like being a part of that community. I don't want to say that it was easy, because I I don't really think that it was. I felt more motivated to push through and to keep going. And I think maybe that's like the intensity in me, but the creativity was forced. And that's not always a bad thing. I think it's like sometimes we can romanticize that as an artist, like every day you wake up and it's an inspirational like thing that you want to paint. But the reality of it is like, it's okay if it's not. And a lot of the last year, I think for a lot of us, it's just felt like you're grinding through it. And that's okay too. I'm really okay with that.
So kind of that whole idea of the muse that a lot of people refer to, especially writers, you know, they're looking for their muse to motivate them to work. That's really a cop out, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't have time to wait for the muse. Like I'm going. We're going. Get in the car. We have stuff to do.
Shut the door behind you. Last time you left the door open.
Right.
Yeah. All right, muse.
Yeah.
It's so fun. But it is so funny because, you know, as a layman, you hear this stuff all your life, like, you know, the writer's muse, and they got to wait for inspiration to, you know, the lightning in the bottle kind of thing, where really, you know, if you're doing the art practice, you're just, like you said, grueling through it. And it comes sometimes by force and sometimes by pure flow. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think sometimes like, those flow moments that you get, those are very real as well. But I think the grinding through is also what's required in order for you to get to the point where the flow comes back.
Yeah.
Like you gotta like continuously commit yourself to like showing up for it, and it'll show up for you when you're ready for it. I really believe that.
It's probably like that in swimming too.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Like, right. Or any sport, there's days where you don't want to go work out. But what are you going to do about it?
Sorry, coach, the muse hasn't struck today, so I'm not going to swim.
Yeah.
New Magazine is our media sponsor for the Tenet podcast. That's NUE. You can follow both the national and the Denver edition of New Magazine on Instagram. The national edition can be found at new_magazine and the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. Look to New for compelling stories from the world of art and fashion. Thanks for listening. The show down at Bridge, how did that come about? Did you approach those guys down there, or did they reach out to you and say, hey, we're going to do this show and we'd love to have you be a part of it?
Yeah. I believe it was Michael Dowling that reached out to me, and this was maybe 6 months ago. And I'd been over there just to see the space, and it was really awesome. And yeah, he basically gave me a call and was like, we're doing this show. The idea is to have all three of our spaces be, I think at the time it was going to be like 3 different solo shows. And then they sort of developed the idea of having 3 like female fronted projects. So yeah, I mean, it's a really cool thing to be a part of, and I'm honored that they asked me to join in.
Yeah, that is cool. And anybody that's listening, you have to go down and check it out, because all 3 of those shows are really, really strong. And, you know, it's different work, it's different perspective, but it definitely sucks you in, and it's incredibly compelling. I need to go back and see it again because I've just been down the one time, but I definitely want to come down before it closes and walk through and spend some time with it. The time that you spent in Miami, what took you to Miami for those 6 months?
So my boyfriend is originally from that area. I was really more interested in like escaping the Detroit winter at that point. I didn't really have a long-term plan, but I was familiar with Art Basel and knew that I wanted to kind of like check that out and see what was going on. There wasn't really like a full plan, so to speak, in what I was doing there or why. But I think looking back on it was one of the most refreshing things I could have done for myself, because of just like that change of pace inherent to moving somewhere new. You just have to like adapt, and very quickly. And being somewhere with warmer weather definitely helped.
What was the art scene like down there?
It was hard to say because I was not there for very long, but I will say the Art Basel crowd created a totally different presence within that space. But I mean, there were a lot of street artists and like graffiti artists, and it seemed like there was a lot going on in terms of like different residencies and studios within the city. It's just like not something I know enough about to this day. Definitely a lot going on.
Gotcha. But a really strong street art scene.
Mm-hmm. And as far as like, I don't know if you've been down to Wynwood, but that's an area that I think a lot of other art districts have taken a nod from. Even Rhino, I see a lot of influence from like the art district in Miami. I think there's a lot of like kind of like correlations between kind of this like public art space and an art district.
How did you get involved with doing murals and being part of the street art scene?
So I ended up meeting Alexandria Pangburn, who's a good friend of mine, back in 2019. So through the residency I did with Taxi, I had ended up meeting her, and she had asked me to collaborate with her on a wall for a festival in, I think, 2019. So we did crush walls together. I had never done a mural before, and she like trusted me with a giant wall, and I was just really happy to be there. So yeah, and I think that's why I'm really excited about building Babe Walls as well, is just knowing that unless you have the right resources in front of you or know the right people, it can be very difficult to get a wall to even just paint. And I think Babe Walls as a project has been really cool to like expand those opportunities for emerging artists and people that want to like understand and explore what public art is and how to really be a part of it.
That's had to have been a really cool experience. And you guys were extremely successful the first year around, and now you're about ready to do it another time for the second annual Babe Walls. And you seem like the perfect pairing with Alex. Like you guys seem like you would get along really well, like two peas in the pod. I could see you guys. That's why you're able to be so successful.
Thank you. I mean, that means a lot because she's like a really, really hard worker. And I think we only see like the surface level of what that girl gets done. So, yeah, I mean, working with her is amazing because she has an agenda and she's on a mission, and it's motivating to be around a team of people that are wanting to get the same things done that you want to get done. That feels really good. So she's definitely, I mean, she's the founder and director of Babe Walls, in case anyone wasn't familiar with Alex's work, but it's been a privilege to be a part of that team. And I'm looking forward to what we can do this summer in Arvada.
Yeah. Explain and tell people where this is happening in Arvada and how many artists are involved.
Sure. So we've got, I believe the final total is 24 artists, and we'll be painting along the Ralston Trail in Arvada. So we'll have more details as the dates get closer, but it'll be July 15th through 18th, 2021, down in Arvada. It's going to be a free, open to the public event, and we've invited, all of our artists, and everyone will get paid. And we're just excited to be able to like continue to build this project that promotes and celebrates inclusivity in a way that's in a way that's really unique to Denver, and just like as far as public art goes, it's something that we're really excited about.
That is exciting. Mm-hmm. Like last year, it was always a collaboration type of thing. Two artists paired together. Sometimes there was three. Is that the way the format's working again this year?
Mm-hmm. It'll be two artists at least per wall.
Who are you collaborating with?
I'm working with an artist named Emily Ding. She's from Houston, Texas. If you haven't seen her work before, highly recommend it. She does a lot of figurative sort of flora, fauna, a lot of wildlife and animals. So we're in the midst of planning our wall right now, if you can believe it, this far in advance. But she's super talented, and I'm really looking forward to working with her.
Right on. So how does that work? Are you just like taking phone calls or doing the Zoom like we're doing right now? How do you guys go about communicating?
Right. That's going to be different for like any artist you talk to, but we've FaceTimed a few times and then got on the phone and sent sketches back and forth. I think like with the internet, things are so much easier to do that anyway. But yeah, she's been really great to work with so far. And as long as you can get on the phone when you say you're going to call somebody, it's like really not an issue.
I guess wanted to know too, like, how does that dialogue work? Like, one of you came up with the initial kind of foundation of the idea, and then the other one interjects, and then now it's just this back and forth thing. How does that work?
Yeah, really similar to that. I think the way both of us approached it was sort of like we took work that we liked of each other's and we're like, hey, really like this piece. You know, what's our idea? Like, what's our theme? So Emily and I have talked about kind of like this duality of like, kind of like this darkness and relating it to different pieces that I've made and different projects she's done, where I'm thinking of one in particular where it talks about like she painted these birds in really bright colors, but it's also kind of like a sad feeling piece. So talking about like emotionally where we want to go with it, I think has helped us direct the overall project and like determine what it's going to be and what it's going to look like.
Before you start painting, do you guys have to submit anything to whoever's giving you these walls as far as what the content is going to be, or they just give you free reign?
Not for this one, no. I think with a lot of clients you do, but for this festival, we're not allowed to use any words since it's a public trail. It's like a public bike trail, but it's pretty open-ended as far as like what we're allowed to do, which is pretty cool.
Last year, you guys raised money via Kickstarter. Since it was so successful last year, were you able just to secure sponsors to help defray the cost of paying everybody and putting on the festival and materials and all that?
So in a way, yes. We were contacted by the city of Arvada after Bay Balls last year. And they basically said, like, we'd love to work with you. And we were able to put together a proposal that they liked and allowed us to kind of sidestep the Kickstarter section of putting it all together.
That's awesome that they actually, saw what you did last year and reached out to you and said, hey, we would love to have you and host you here and give you this space. That's really cool. So no words being able to be used for this particular festival this year. It'll all be collaborative. How long of a area is this that you guys are painting?
Each collaborative pair has between 30 to 40 feet. Well, it's hard to say too, because some of the heights of the walls are different. So I guess if you're thinking about like how wide something is, I mean, it's like hundreds of feet. Can we say that? Hundreds.
Hundreds of feet.
Hundreds. And I think the fact that you can see it happen right in front of your eyes is what makes it the most interesting, because you can come back each day and see a little bit more being added to the pieces that stick out to you, where you're like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen with this one.
Yeah, it is fun.
To come back and revisit it, I think is really interesting.
I agree. It's fun to watch people paint for sure. I watched Alex do her mural with, was it Olive last year at Crush?
Mm-hmm.
And that was really interesting because because we'd interviewed her, I was just curious to see her work in person. And it was interesting to see it kind of maybe a third of the way through and then see how it evolved each day to the final project.
Mm-hmm.
How long does those murals stay up after they're done?
It kind of depends on the space and the wall. It's all determined by the building owner. So It's kind of like, I think with murals, you have to be okay with it going away like the very next day. But sometimes they're up for 5 years or until it fades. So it really just is dependent on like the project it's a part of or like the longevity of the building. How
do you feel when this thing that you've created and you've spent so much time and energy gets painted over?
I think about it like Legos. And with that is like, what I mean by that, I guess, is when you build something with Legos, from the get-go that it's not always going to be there. And I think it makes it easier to kind of say goodbye when it's time for that, because it's like not going to be, the nature of murals isn't for their preservation. It's like for them to be enjoyed and experienced, and like they have a certain lifespan in the same way Legos do. And so as long as you can like wrap your head around that idea, at least that's what I try to do. then you're in better shape than if you're expecting it to kind of be this Sistine Chapel situation.
Gotcha.
So that's how I approach it.
When I reached out to you, you said that it was going to be a really busy summer. Are you doing outside of Babe Walls? Are you doing other commissions?
I am. And I'm doing I don't know how much I can talk about it, but I'm doing like some sort of Airbnb artist project where there's like 20 or so different rooms in this almost hotel, and each artist gets a room. So I'm starting that pretty soon. And then I'm in the midst of a residency project up in Boulder that's, getting started, and I can talk more about that as the months develop, but definitely a lot of things in the works that I'm very excited about.
Good.
How do you go about getting this work? Are you at a point where people reach out to you that have seen your work and say, hey, we want you to paint this for us?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I think the benefit of having been somewhere like rooted for a little bit, you're able to seek out the people who you feel like you would, get along with, or at least have a good conversation with. And that can go a long way. So I think just trying to have as many conversations with people as I can has been helpful. And trying to team up with other artists that I really love their work, or it kind of just depends. There's no set answer as to what the right thing to do is, but I try to just put my head down and work as much as I can. And then when I'm not doing that, try to engage with like the community around me.
So a lot of networking on your end.
Right. And making sure that I'm showing up for different openings and shows of people locally that I enjoy their work or want to be supportive. I think like just continuing to show up can do a lot as well.
Okay. Do you do a lot of solo stuff, or it sounds like you do a lot of collaboration outside of like the Babe Walls, that you've done a lot of collaboration on various murals? Is that correct?
Most of my murals have been collaborative, and I think that's been really fun, because otherwise you have these big walls that are like pretty daunting, but being able to work on it with another person or two has been really cool. And then I recently did a collab piece with a friend of mine, Mo Graham, which I think has been the only work on canvas or panel that I've collaborated with. I guess I'm working on another one too, but it's not done yet. Yeah, I think it kind of just depends. Like it depends on the project, and it's all motivated by like the situation of, whatever the project at hand is. Sometimes it makes more sense to work on it with somebody else, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
I could see where that, I don't know. For me, I can't imagine. It would seem very daunting. So having somebody that I could collaborate with and also be accountable to, I guess, too, as far as like, hey, we need to get this done. I would think that would be a really nice situation.
Mm-hmm.
This, in passing, this show that you had earlier this year, I wanted to talk about some of the work in that as well. I want to talk about this because it's so different than anything else that I've seen of yours. This like black and white work. Mm-hmm. Where did that come from?
So this entire show had a lot to deal with the influence of like black and white as an idea, and thinking about the separation of layers, and having, even within the colored pieces above, there's specific layers of only black and only white. And so within these smaller works of only black and whites, they have a certain intentionality of like, even though there's color removed, there's still texture, there's still line, it's still my work, but kind of thinking about it as more of like a study is what I was describing them as. And especially being someone that relies almost and leans on using color, it was an interesting exploration of, your work is to some people only color, but what are you without that? And so having the excuse and like opportunity to explore that, I think was what I was really curious about doing.
I really love it. It's really stunning. This particular one, 1951 part 1, if you go onto the website and look under work, if you scroll down far enough, you'll see a lot of these black and white pieces that we're talking about.
And then you got, 1951 Part 5, that's just black, but there's texture to it. And that, I really like that one. And I was just looking at it. It's really cool and minimalist, in a sense that, there's lack of anything other than black. And I really like the way that plays.
Thank you. And the reference to 1951 is to Jackson Pollock. In that year was when they did this film, basically, where he was like painting on glass. I don't know if you ever saw that, but I think it was titled 1951. And it was a year where he used like pretty exclusively black and white paint. So it's kind of a nod to that era.
How do you go about selling your art? Obviously, you have these shows, people can purchase it. Do you sell many pieces off of social media like Instagram?
Yes and no. I think it's all just dependent. And I like to think about the people that end up collecting something. It's more of like their connection to it is the thing that matters most to me. So sometimes that comes through Instagram, people that have been following my work for a while. Other times it's through a gallery or kind of like a friend of a friend. But I try to focus on the side of it that really highlights the fact that ultimately when that person has a piece of art, whether it's mine or somebody else's, it's like the way they connect to it is what makes it unique, and like what makes it kind of continue this life of its own is like the connection it has to the collector.
So I got a question in regards to selling abstract art, right? So a lot of like the famous pieces that you see are really huge, right? When you think of Clifford Still or, not that Rothko's were all big, but, some of his more famous works are really big. Frank Stella. Do you find that people are attracted to the bigger pieces, or can you have the smaller pieces that are very probably price accessible? But do you think people are attracted to the large pieces when it comes to abstracts?
I think so, but I also think there's like a different intention and like purpose served within different sizes. Because I think, like you said, there's an accessibility element of being able to have people experience the work. Like not everybody's going to be able to afford a 10 by 10 foot piece, and that's totally okay. And like sometimes people maybe don't have the wall space for something of that size, but like they're looking for something specifically for their office where they spend every day and want something like very small and more sentimental. And I think like it just goes back to like what it is that you're looking for within that acquisition. Sometimes you want a piece that consumes you, and sometimes you want a piece that feels more approachable. And I don't think there's like a wrong way about it, but sometimes it's that end result is determined by your budget.
Right. And I love the way you put that.
Thank you.
We ask this question all the time of artists. How do you go about pricing your art?
I think a good way to look at that is using like comparisons of other people that are kind of on par with like where you're at in your career, and using that as a way to like inform where you want to go. But at the same time, pricing is really difficult and there's no clear-cut answer to it. It's a lot of times about feel. Like, how does this price feel? You're a lot of times with like my curator, we'll try on different prices for a specific work and see like how that sits. And using that as a reference point as to like how to make that decision has been helpful so far.
So you actually have somebody that helps you curate?
Well, just in the past of like, for example, working with Bell projects, I work closely with Lindsay Bell, who's the director, and she has a really good sense of like where I'm at in my career and can sit with me and understand like what something was priced at a year ago and look at it and say, this is what this should be priced at now. So I think definitely having other people that understand the market and that industry is really helpful. But as an artist, you can kind of take that into your own hands and study other artists that might be doing something similar to you in order to like determine your own price range and price scale. It's not impossible to do on your own, but I'm just saying it's definitely helpful to have someone who knows this market.
So it's an ongoing conversation.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
Did you already have kind of an idea in your mind what you wanted to price things for this current project, or for the bridge project, I should say?
Yeah, I think so.
I love those little pieces. I love the fact that you have, and those little pieces I think are like $150, correct?
Mhm.
I love that you have something that's accessible for anyone that came in through the gallery. If you're looking for a bigger piece, you will have that. You have
Mhm.
something that, incorporated, you had a piece that incorporated, or two pieces that incorporated neon, which those are going to be more expensive because of what they are. But then you had those little 5x7s. And I love that as a whole series. If I was going to, if I hit the lotto, I'd want to buy the whole group of those and put them,
That's awesome.
display them together.
Thank you.
But yeah, I always think it's great. And I find that as we've been talking with other artists, that the ones that are really successful as far as selling art, they always have a price point that anybody can get in on. Outside of the originals, you also sell prints?
I do prints, or have done prints like once a year, but that's not really something that's a big part of my output. It's more of like a way to continue that accessibility element of like, not everybody has the wall space or has the budget for a bigger piece, or maybe just doesn't want a piece of art to take care of. And that's like totally okay. And having prints allows people to be a part of like what I'm doing and share the art that I make, but in a way that has like less pressure attached to it. And so I've been doing prints. Like I'll do like a print series maybe once a year just to like kind of keep that fresh, but it's not something I'm like continuously doing.
What other things do you do to, outside of selling prints and then obviously having these shows? Do you do like studio visits with your collectors?
Mm-hmm. I do. So I have different collectors and visitors in the studio. And then, I mean, there's just so many moving parts of like what a studio is and kind of like the business behind that too. I think being able to see it as such is really important, and being able to shift that mindset of like being an artist and making art to like having this as a studio. I run a studio as a business. I think that's been a really important part of like being able to like have more people in here and a part of the conversation of like kind of what my art is about and where it's going.
And talking with other people, and then you talking about it in these terms, it seems like that connection is a really important part of the equation. Like having that connection with the art buyer, they really desire that. Have you found that to be true?
Definitely. Mm-hmm. And I think the most important thing is like, for me, when someone's like collecting my work, is like, I want them to feel genuinely connected to it. I don't think it's not always necessary that someone comes into the studio buying something. It's more of like, if people feel a genuine connection to it, that even if they don't buy something, it's like they might eventually, but the important thing is that you're like being genuine with people and allowing who you are to become a part of like the story that your art tells. Like you said, that's something that people really cherish, and like that's what makes art mean something. Is like when you have a really cool conversation with an artist, or like something that they painted reminds you of where you grew up, or you have these like interesting moments that can't always be scripted. And I think being able to like use those in that genuine way is what is important.
And so for someone that would be looking at buying your art because they think it's a investment,
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel about that kind of philosophy, that it's more of an investment as opposed to having some kind of connection with it?
Yeah. That's not my favorite perspective, but I do think investing in any woman's art at this point is definitely an investment. But I just am more on the side of like, you should be buying art because you love it. Like you should buy art because you feel it. And to me, when I've bought art, that's how I approach it. And so that's all I know. I don't want to like discredit people for buying work that they know will increase in value, but that just wouldn't be the way that I would approach it. So I can't really speak on it so much.
Gotcha. I feel the exact same way. There has to be some kind of connection. And I know that there's people out there that, that's what they do is they buy pieces and then they turn them after a certain amount of time and make a profit and then buy more art. But yeah, if I'm going to buy something, I definitely want to have that connection to that piece or the artist, sometimes it's that experience, that connection you've made with that person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what kind of things do you have going on for the rest of this year?
So the main focus right now is getting through my summer, which is jam-packed. And then I'm in the midst of like a few projects that don't either have like titles or are still kind of on the DL. But I think with Babe Walls being one of the first bigger projects for the summer, I'm really looking forward to that one first and foremost. So luckily that is a project that's like an ongoing event as well. And we'll be doing more and more throughout the year, but that's definitely a highlight of my year.
Right on. Do you have more shows scheduled for in the fall or later on this year?
I do, but I can't talk about them quite yet.
Okay.
So
all right.
It's all good.
I'll give you more info when I have it.
Awesome.
It seems very mysterious.
Mm. Well, it has to be. Unfortunately, for the time being.
I got a question if you don't mind,
go
Tom.
for it.
Do you think this is a good time for women in art? And what would make it better for women in art?
I think it's always been a good time for women in art. I think the difference now is others' reception to it. I think right now people are encouraged to listen to women more. And I want to include non-binary artists in this as well. I think basically the non-male voice is something that a lot of people are basically saying, let's uncenter what has been the male voice for so long. And let's really give some attention to women and non-binary artists in this art space, because it's not that there hasn't been a time for us. It just hasn't been given the same permission. So I think really just distinguishing that is important, and understanding that it's not that this is now all of a sudden the time. We're just having different conversations about the way we can exist safely in these spaces.
Yeah, I like that. That's interesting. And then another question I've been asking lately is, what does it mean to be bold as an artist?
I think being bold can be so many different things. And I think for me, it feels like it would relate most to just doing what you want. And to me, when I think about bold artists, it's like, I see that as people that are doing exactly what they want to do with their work. And sometimes bold art can be like really bright, colorful work. Sometimes bold can be really sensitive, very feminine work. Sometimes bold can be profane. Other times it can be very soft. And I think the interesting thing about boldness is that it's going to be unique to each artist individually. There's no correct definition of it. And I think that's what is cool.
Awesome. Thank you. That's a great answer.
Romelle, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking
both
time
for having me. It's been great chatting with you both. And I'm really happy you got to see the show over at Bridge Project. And I hope I get to see you over there again.
Absolutely. I definitely will swing by there at least one more time.
When does that show end?
It ends, the last day is June 26th.
Okay. Well, this has been a lot of fun and educational, and I love your work. Early on, I wasn't a big fan of abstract, but doing this podcast and talking to people that actually do abstract art and understanding why they do it, I've become a huge fan. So I love your work. I think you're doing great stuff, and I can't wait to see what continues to come out of your heart. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Great talking to you both.
So check out Romelle's exhibit, Supersonic Nonplace, at the Bridge Project that runs through the 26th of June, and then go out and support all the artists that are participating in Babe Walls, which happens July 15th through the 18th along the Ralston Trail in Arvada, Colorado. For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great
week.